Hey folks, David Stewart here. It's time for some more Storycraft. Today it's going to be HP Lovecraft and what I call the descent into madness. This is a style of storytelling, not so much like a character archetype or even a style of plot, but a style of storytelling in total in which you take the reader from what's known and what's predictable and what's understandable and what's familiar and safe and slowly but surely drag them into something which is weird, bizarre, fantastical, horrific, unpredictable, and really insane. H.P. Lovecraft was really a master of this style of storytelling, and he iterated it many times in lots of different stories, and very often his descents into madness included an actual descent down into the earth, which is why I like to focus on him. But, of course, other authors have done this, even before him. If you look at Joseph Conrad at Heart of Darkness, I think that's a great novel to look at that expresses this. And, of course, lots of the different iterations of Heart of Darkness, including Apocalypse Now, or even the video game Spec Ops The Line, which is based on Heart of Darkness, use this technique to very, very good effect. The main point is that you start with something that's known and you gradually shift into something that's unknown and horrible, so that the emotions for what is effective in the horror genres and even in the thriller genres come on slowly and are built up over time, producing an overall feeling of unease, rather than immediately having somebody immersed into something which is gory or horrific or bizarre. The transition, I think, is what makes it effective. I think a great template to look at for how this technique works is one of his stories called The Nameless City. Now, he's iterated this in lots of different stories, but The Nameless City includes the physical descent. It's got everything there. So if you've never read The Nameless City, it's about a protagonist who's an explorer or an archaeologist, and he goes to this hidden city in the Arabian desert that all of the Arabs have warned him about, and it's completely deserted, and he finds these temples that are too short to walk around in. He has to kind of crawl on his hands and knees with the torch to see what they're all about. And so that's the first step out of the familiar and the known into the unknown. Is it's a temple, but there's one thing that's weird about it. Finally, he finds a staircase and feels compelled to walk down the staircase. So this is another thing about the descent into madness, is that rather than turning back from the madness, you usually have to continue going on. There's something that compels the character, or there's a particular reason that you must go on, because there's something at the end of it that you have to see, have to do, or have to resolve, like something with Heart of Darkness. So he begins descending down the steps, and as he descends down the steps, things get stranger. His torch basically runs out of light, and he ends up in total darkness. But by the time he reaches this bottom hallway, there's a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, and so that light really is represented by madness. As he walks through the tunnel, he begins to see things which are stranger and stranger. One of the things he sees are these mummies from a reptilian species that's not human, and they're in these like glass coffins, and it's very bizarre and fantastical. He begins to see murals that depict the culture of these reptiles or whoever lived in this nameless city. And the murals begin to get stranger and stranger as they depict the progress of this culture. At the end, there's basically a picture of a person being ripped to shreds. And he's very close to the light. And when he realizes there's an open gate and a mist there. So what you usually have at the end of the descent into madness is you have a threshold. And the threshold has to be either crossed or escaped from. And so if you cross the threshold, you're embracing the madness. And if you can avoid crossing that threshold, you are clinging to your sanity. And indeed, that's what happens in the Nameless City. As a wind rushes down and tries to suck him into this blazing light that's there, that's lit up all of the murals, that he's been able to see the progress of this ancient, forgotten, and dead civilization. And then as the wind is trying to suck him in and he's able to avoid it, he sees the ghosts of these reptilian creatures shut the door on him. And so the question when the door is shut is, did he hallucinate it? Did he actually experience these things? What was actually in the mist? Was that the immortality that these lizard people were searching for? Did he want that immortality? Was it too terrifying to think of that immortality? And can you end up believing him based on how fantastical the tale is? And so one of the things that's, I think, very effective about the descent into madness is the gradualness of it. Each thing can be believed in the context of the thing that's before it, but by the time you get to the end, it's something that's really bizarre or completely unbelievable, and makes you question whether the person who's telling you this, the narrator, is actually sane or not. Has he actually descended into madness? Did he escape from the madness or not? Lots of different movies, books, video games have used this technique to really, really good effect. Almost too many to mention. In fact, I've used it. So my newest book, or mini book that you can get, it's called Voices of the Void. It features an actual physical descent into madness, and the main character is actually insane in several different ways, and you start to uncover those as you go deeper down into this mine. I think it's particularly effective actually in video games to have this particular technique, because with a video game you have each level. In each level you can introduce new gameplay ideas, you can introduce new monsters. So if you're playing something like Doom in many ways features this kind of descent into madness. You start by killing what amounts to humans, and then you end up at the end fighting very, very fantastical monsters that wouldn't have really, that maybe would have seemed silly if you'd seen them in the very, very first level, the big floating eye monsters and things like that. And the iterations of Doom have actually, I think, used this to pretty good effect over the years as well. The Doom, I think, was it Doom 3? Back in the aughts, I think was very, very effective. It turned the lights off, you went into darkness, and things got stranger and stranger and scarier as you went. So I thought it was a very, very effective use of this. Likewise, I already mentioned, Spec Ops: The Line. There's too many different things to mention. If you've played World of Warcraft, dungeons tend to use this as well. So if you're playing classic WoW and you're going through the dead mines, you start in a mine and you're literally descending down further into the mine, and things get weirder as you go until you reach a ship at the bottom of the mine. They also did an iteration of this with the new expansion, with an instance called the Underrot, where as you go further into it, the colors begin to disappear and are replaced by a color palette that's very, very uncanny. So first thing that happens is the colors go away and you end up with your character walking around what amounts to a black and white landscape. Then other colors come in and you end up with this kind of green, sickly landscape towards the end of the instance. I think it's a very, very effective use of this idea of gradual replacement of the known and the understandable with the weird and the bizarre. So anyway, that's the explanation of that. I used it in my latest book. You can actually get that book for free if you're on my mailing list. So if you're on my mailing list, you probably already have it. If you haven't gotten it, check the link down below in the description box, and you can join my mailing list and get that for free. It's called Voices of the Void. If you want to see what the book cover looks like, this is what it looks like. It's not on any retail outlets yet. It's just exclusively for the people who watch YouTube and who follow me on my mailing list. So check that out if you're into sci-fi, horror, and whatever else you may find within that. It's different from Lovecraft in its actual the way that it is actually told. It's told primarily in third person. He uses first person, and it's very different from Lovecraft in lots of different ways, but it does include that descent into madness. And of course, at the bottom of the descent into madness is the question of sanity and the threshold of, do you walk over and embrace the insanity? And there's a horror at the bottom, which is unimaginable. That's another thing that you find in the Lovecraftian style of storytelling, is as you get further and further into the conspiracy, further and further down the mine, the thing which waits at the bottom is more and more uncanny, indescribable, and horrific. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.